Chief of Staff of the Naval Education Department in Royal Thai Navy, Malinda Migoda, Research Associate LKI, Mr. K.M. Tanjib Alam, Head of Chamber, Tanjib Alam and Associate, Dr. Vijay Sakuja, VIF, Dr. Naing Sweo, Thenenga Institute for Strategic Studies, Myanmar, and Professor Indrajit Rai from Nepal, to please take their seats on the dais. I once again request all speakers to finish their presentations in the allotted 10 minutes so that the floor can be opened to the audience also. We will keep the protocol of the chair ringing the bell once at 9 minutes and twice at 10 minutes. I now hand over the proceedings to the chair.
Hello, can you hear me? Good afternoon, gentlemen. Well, in this session, we discuss maritime domain awareness. He can't hear that. You know, maritime domain awareness is actually the new buzzword. In 2018, in October, our Prime Minister visited Japan on an official visit, and there were 32 agreements which were signed. And there was only one agreement which was signed with respect to defense matters. And it was not the US-2 which the Navy would want to buy, or the lithium-ion batteries, or the cooperation on building new submarines. It was on sharing maritime domain awareness. The same year in November, I attended a seminar on Indo-Pacific where we had Her Excellency Harinder Sidhu, our Australian High Commissioner to India, giving the keynote address. And in listing out the areas of maritime cooperation between the two countries, she listed maritime domain awareness right on top. Now in BIMSTEC, it is only recently, as you know, that maritime issues have been brought in under the ambit of discussions, and here we are discussing maritime domain awareness. Why is this? Because oceans are the most unregulated of the world commons, and they are a hotbed of illegal activity. Human trafficking, drug trafficking, piracy, terrorism, you name it. And today everything is emanating from the sea. You know, 1999 was a watershed year for this part of the world. There was a ship which was called MV Alondra Rainbow. She sailed from Indonesia with some 7 tons of aluminium, could be worth about 15 million US dollars in today's terms, bound for Japan. She was hijacked by the pirates. The crew was blindfolded, left at sea. The ship was painted and given a new name of Mega Rama, and she sailed instead of Japan into the Indian Ocean, bound for the Gulf. And this information now started to get shared that there is a ship which has disappeared. And there was a ship which passed this Mega Rama, the new name, and tallied the description and reported, and soon Indian Coast Guard, Indian Navy aircraft and ships were in hot pursuit. And the ship was arrested. And this went on record to become the first internationally coordinated action against piracy. The same year, the International Fusion Center came about in Singapore to tackle such problems. A couple of years back, and the IFC Singapore has been doing yeoman service, doing an outstanding job. A couple of years back, the International Fusion Center in Madagascar has been commissioned. But before that, we had the problem of piracy in the Gulf of Aden, and it was only collation of maritime domain awareness which eventually solved the problem. A common picture was developed and projected in Northwood in UK and in Bahrain, and we know all of us participated in that campaign. But maritime domain awareness is not as easy, to bring about. India has done a remarkable job in the last 2 years. We have an international fusion center in Gurugram, which collates inputs from so many sensors, coastal radar, chains, AIS, inputs, space-based AIS, coastal radar stations which are commissioned in some of the island countries. We have concluded white shipping agreements with nearly 20 countries and many agencies. We have a mandate by the government to conclude white shipping agreements for over 37 countries. And now the Indian Navy has offered presence of international navies in this International Fusion Center, because maritime domain awareness is not only exchanging contacts on the radar. There is something more to it. What is the intelligence? How are you going to analyze it? And then there is a problem of jurisdiction of data. It is a state jurisdiction. Tomorrow, Myanmar has some maritime domain awareness. Would they be wanting to share with us? How does that bring about, how does that sharing do? How are we going to overcome the problem of jurisdiction? How are we going to sit down and analyze the data which is available together? So we have an eminent panel, and we'll hear them out. And these are the issues which have to be addressed, and including what we have in the concept note, which specifically reads that what are the achievable and mutually acceptable facets of MDA which can be implemented in a given time frame. In the Bay of Bengal, it's a small area relatively, but how do we start and where do we go from there? So over to the first speaker. How do you want to run it? Would you like to start from the right? Yeah, okay.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Captain Vichirapon Wonakonsawang, Deputy Chief of Staff of the Naval Education Department. And this is my scope of presentation. I will start with the Thai Maritime Enforcement Agencies, and I propose my idea on BIMSTEC, how to construct BIMSTEC Maritime Domain Awareness and Recommendation. Okay, so as Thailand does not have Coast Guard, so all maritime enforcement agencies work together as one. It is led by Royal Thai Navy, and the rest are as shown on the screen. So it becomes Thai Maritime Enforcement Command Center under the leadership of the Royal Thai Navy. Okay, and the head of the Thai MECC, or Thai Maritime Enforcement Command Center, is the Prime Minister of Thailand. Okay, and second in command is Chief of Navy. It is established under the National Maritime Interest Act 2019, just early of this year. So what Thailand needs for the maritime information, that is about IUU fishing, piracy and armed robberies, maritime migration, oil and gas platform threats, oil spill, ports and its facilities threats, and drug trafficking, as well as maritime and natural disaster. Each country has its own context to cope with its maritime threat. For Thailand, we need this information. The concept of BIMSTEC Maritime Domain Awareness is the effective understanding of all activities and movements at sea within the BIMSTEC waters that could impact the security, safety, economy, or environment of the BIMSTEC member states. It should be the integration of two things: regional maritime intelligence and regional maritime situation awareness. Okay. It should be based on net-centric principles that will provide a secure collaborative information sharing environment and unprecedented access to decision quality information. A fundamental attribute of a net-centric environment is the ability for any consumer of information to get the information that is needed when it is needed. It is the environment in which each data provider publishes their data for consumer based on appropriate permissions is very important. Each maritime agency will have multi-level security protocols with cross-domain information sharing, allowing information to flow between classification domains and be automatically filtered when flowing from high level to low level. This is the example. Okay, the key driver of BIMSTEC maritime domain awareness is interagency governance domestically and internationally to coordinate and unify efforts across a broad range of member states, local, private sectors, and international partners. The interagency BIMSTEC MDA governance structure should be provide sufficient direction in developing policy and standards. And the most important thing is please use existing facilities and networks of each member state that already contribute to the maritime domain awareness. At this moment, we have in the Information Sharing Center, IOR, Indian Ocean region. We have Information Fusion Center from Singaporean Navy that Thailand is a member state of this Information Sharing Center. We have a recap regional agreement on combating piracy and armed robbery against ships in Asia Pacific, which Thai is a member state of this Information Sharing Center. So this is the process of maritime domain awareness. We start from the left, the observation that we get from sensor, from ships, radar, and so on, and from our maritime agencies, enforcement agencies, and then we collect data from such observations, and we fuse, we analyze and disseminate. And to decide and act, it is the other thing. The other thing that we need, like a rapid deployment force and so on. We have to, on this stage, we need only MDA, maritime domain awareness. But on the next stage, we may need like rapid deployment force. Which member state is going to act when we get information? Okay, so all the spectrum is composed of situational awareness and current and predictive intelligence. That is RMI and RI, regional intelligence maritime information. So these are how to collect the data, the information. So in order to create BIMSTEC maritime domain awareness, we need monitoring and collection network. The second thing is fusion and analysis centers, and we need a dissemination system. We need archiving and maintaining system, and also a governance organization. So because of the time constraint, I skip this part. Okay, let's see this. So we need the BIMSTEC Maritime Domain Awareness Governance Organization, which is composed of Regional Maritime Intelligence Working Group and Regional Maritime Surveillance Working Group. So this organization will run MDA Maritime Agency hubs and Information Fusion Center. So the information will be classified according to the top, the BIMSTEC MDA governance organization to share. So the lower part is the process of information monitoring and information collection, fusion analysis, dissemination, and decision action, as well as archiving and maintaining. So these are how it's gonna work. This is my proposed idea. So I would like to recommend something. We have to determine what is the requirement of BIMSTEC MDA. So we have a different needs because of different context of maritime threat. We have to establish relationships requisite to accessing and sharing information. We have to identify and obtain relief from policies that hinder information access. We have to break down cultural barriers to sharing information, solve technical challenges associated with the information sharing, automate systems and processes to collect, manage, disseminate, and display information, conduct training, planning, and operational decision-making processes to capitalize on greater access to information. So far, Thailand has contributed to the maritime domain awareness we work together with India, not only the Indian Navy, but also India Coast Guard. I would like, moreover, we have to comply with the international ocean governance, which means international laws and institutions. Okay, because of time constraint, I think you know already about it. So these are main international maritime organizations that control the rule of the sea, composed of International Maritime Organization, International Labour Organization, Food and Agricultural Organization of the UN, and International Seabed Authority, or ISA. So before the conclusion, I would like to end up with this proposal. So all of us, we have the same stake, that is maritime interest. We explore and exploit the maritime interest. So we safeguard them. We safeguarding freedom, safety, and sustainability of above. And so we get maritime security finally. In order to do that, to explore and exploit the BIMSTEC, we need BIMSTEC maritime power that we have to share together. We need BIMSTEC maritime governance to make it sustainable. And so if we can do that, it is blue economy, that is the sustainable economy, and from the sea. And we need to share BIMSTEC maritime strategy, that is to connect between the means, that is BIMSTEC maritime power, and the ends, that is BIMSTEC maritime security. With that, I conclude my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. You are really very comprehensive. May I now request the Sri Lankan representative, Malinda, to kindly give his presentation.
So as the chair previously mentioned, I'm attending a lot of the different defense dialogues over the past few years. It seems that MDA has become the flavor of the day, so to speak. And there is a collective interest, especially in the Indian Ocean region countries, to take MDA relationship to the next level, but there's this frustration that operationalizing this has been much more slower than some of the interest that's been put forward. So before I talk about the importance of sharing maritime domain information, I would like also provide some context to my presentation as well. Sri Lanka's maritime domain is fairly large, especially when you compare it to its total land area. It possesses an exclusive economic zone, which is more than 7 times the land area, and being a maritime nation with an economy increasingly being underpinned by international ocean-borne trade, it is vital that we develop our maritime domain awareness. So I think if you look at some of the challenges about MDA, the thing that is very self-evident is that one size does not fit all when it comes to information sharing agreements. Because while on principle it is easy to understand that information sharing has many benefits. On the operational level, it may not be that easy. A number of factors that come into play, including trust, differences in technological maturity and sophistication, will affect countries' willingness to share information. In addition, part of the burden of maritime history and tradition owes itself to a general culture of secrecy. Dealers in commodities don't want competitors to know the sources and destinations of their cargoes. Fishermen don't want others to know where their favorite fishing spots are. And this tradition of secrecy, along with the nature of the sea and the ships, has led to maritime transportation being the preferred vector of some of the world's most infamous and nefarious cargoes. Slaves, contraband, narcotics, conventional weapons to start a new war, or a weapon of mass destruction to inflict terror. All of these more can be transported in greater quantities and often with greater secrecy by sea than any other mode. The international community has also struggled to maximize the good and minimize the evil brought by maritime transportation. And there's also a number of different paradoxes and limits that countries face. So, for example, if you take a concept like freedom of navigation, even within, say, like a bloc like the Quad, there are differences of opinion when it comes to freedom of navigation because they have different strategic interests. And those interests also extend to smaller countries like Sri Lanka, who want to increase our openness and connection to the rest of the world, but as well as we are quite aware and we are reluctant, more than reluctant, we are, I would say, worried that we would be embedded in certain regional geostrategic competitions. So subscribing fully without reservation to things like freedom of navigation comes with its own challenges. So I think, but on the other hand, achieving awareness about maritime activities needs transparency, and it needs for us to not only share information, but also to understand what that information means. Watching the flow of maritime activities and actors is of little use unless what is being seen can be fully understood. Decision makers must be able to differentiate a normal and innocent scene from one containing anomalies that deserve further investigation. So I think in terms of going ahead, there are a couple of challenges. Something like so I realized there was an expert group of there was a meeting with a group of experts last year, I believe, on maritime issues conducted by BIMSTEC. But I think that we should be wary of also doubling our efforts, especially given that there are other regional architectures also already engaging in some of these issues, especially with IRA. And if you take, but it is also a natural fit in some ways. So the challenge would be for BIMSTEC to be complementary to organization like IRA, because even with BIMSTEC you have like 5 of the 7 countries already represented in IRA, and I think going forward, maybe opening up BIMSTEC to having more observers, partners, and dialogue partners who are part of IRA could be also a way to fuse these 2 programs together. So if you look at IRA, has they have a maritime safety and security working group. A couple of months ago, they met in Colombo, like with members, and they focused on a number of different issues such as search and rescue, HADR. So it's a question of not doubling these efforts. But I think one thing that wasn't discussed in that sort of meeting, and given the tendency of not tendency, but the objective of BIMSTEC to increase connectivity and economic cooperation, one thing that hasn't been fully addressed, as far as I know, is undersea cables. So a lot of people think that increasingly, because of that the internet is actually on the cloud somewhere or in some server farms. But the connection happens through these vast array of cables which are laid on the seabed. And there's a whole range of questions regarding the ownership of these cables, because it's not the coverage under UNCLOS is not that extensive. So I think BIMSTEC, my suggestion is there could be a scope for a study group especially for the maritime nations to look at this issue. The other one final suggestion, also in terms of making BIMSTEC a little bit more effective, perhaps overall as an organization, is that Sri Lanka, in addition to having the chair, maybe having a troika of the past chair, the current chair, and the future chair, like to make sure that policies remain consistent and move forward. So I try to keep my comments brief, because unlike some of the other panelists here, I do not have any experience either in the merchant or military marine, so I would like to hear more from their perspective, especially about the technical aspects. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. But you may not have the experience, but you have brought out some very, very relevant points which we'll discuss later. Next, I invite a representative from Bangladesh, KN Tanjib Alam, Head of Chamber. I'm sorry I'm not introducing the speakers because their biodatas are available, and I would be taking up very valuable time if I do so. Over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Soni, and welcome to all the participants in this BIMSTEC second Think Tank Dialogue. And in the context of maritime domain awareness, my realization has been that often we forget in this era of communication that actually sea route has played a pivotal role in developing this civilization. Although now when we talk about connectivity, we talk about connectivity through internet or web. But starting point of the civilization has always been actually through sea road. And perhaps BIMSTEC is one of the very few organizations which is actually set up with the aim of Bay of Bengal being the focal point, and our aim of togetherness actually emanates from this idea of Bay of Bengal being the center point. So that is why the discussion about maritime domain has very apt, I would say, one of the focal area that we should be actually talking about. And in terms of developing cooperation, it should be one of our top priority. In that context, and the economic development and security perspective, from security perspective, Bangladesh has a very good news in the sense that we all know that we have Bangladesh has recently resolved their maritime boundary dispute both with India and Myanmar through this international arbitration, and that have actually set the I would say motion for few steps that Bangladesh has actually taken for creating these platform for maritime boundaries or domain awareness. And recently our Prime Minister has visited India, as you will know, about 2 weeks back. In that summit or the top level visit from Bangladesh, the number of MOUs and bilateral agreements were signed between India and Bangladesh. And one of those was actually the observations of the boundary, maritime boundary of Bangladesh, that is actually largely shared with India. So that shows the importance that is given both by India and Bangladesh in securing the safety of this Bay of Bengal or this part of the Bay of Bengal. And from that perspective, Bangladesh actually about day before yesterday, Bangladesh cabinet has approved draft Maritime Zone Act, which is going to be made into law very soon, maybe within the next session, parliamentary session. And keeping that in mind, Bangladesh has actually set, I would briefly focus on the content of this particular act to demonstrate that how we are actually looking at the future activities in the creation of the, securing the maritime domain awareness. And I do not know whether this is like, people say that all great men think alike. So we have chosen the particular area of maritime domain awareness for today's discussion. And exactly the same few issues has been actually addressed in the draft act that has been actually approved by the Bangladesh cabinet, and which was actually IUU in terms of fishing, and armed robbery and piracy at sea, human trafficking, arms smuggling, terrorism. And these are the actually main issues that we need more cooperation because of the size of the bay and the breadth of the challenges that we have. In recent past, about 2 weeks back, government of Bangladesh has actually declared a general clemency to the local pirates who has been actually now on 2 occasions and 2 sessions, they have surrendered their arms and committed themselves to carry out their fishing activities in a manner that would be befitting. And from these activities also, Bangladesh is now set and ready to extend their cooperation for the regional stakeholders, and in particular in a way that both Bangladesh and other countries in the region can actually truly exploit their activities in a manner that is each of the countries can benefit exploitation of their exclusive economic zone. And Bangladesh government has also declared what we are calling actually a blue economy. The prospect that I find it very interesting that of late Bangladesh government has realized the potential for the blue economy and how this could play a pivotal role in the future development of the country as well as regional cooperation. And when we talk about, you see, the size of a country, we always consider that what is the landmass of the country. But what remains, actually access to the sea is actually always discounted or hidden. But that plays the most important role. At the moment, Bangladesh is second largest garments producing country in the world, next to China. Of a country size like Bangladesh, becoming second largest producer of garments in the world is mainly because of the fact that it has got maritime access. Chittagong port has been playing the most important role. 90% of the export is carried out through that port. And without that port, how an economy is affected would be most important example for those would be the countries who are actually, we consider them landlocked. Without access to the sea, how their economy is actually affected. So if we were to make good use of that access for BIMSTEC countries, I think it cannot be emphasized more that we need to work together. And what Captain Vachirapan has suggested, I fully agree with his idea of actually of cooperation, how this really can be done. And in this age of internet and satellite capabilities, it is only fair that we can say that there is no alternative to sharing information, because the capacity of these regional countries are not same. But we can enhance our own capacity by extending cooperation, and that cooperation would basically mean sharing of actionable information. I like that Mr. Vachirapan has actually suggested that when we are exchanging information, we need to exchange those information which based on which we can take remedial action, or we can take do our own planning. There has been number of incidents in terms of IUU fishing that government of Bangladesh has arrested or seized many fishing boats, trawlers which were actually flying with within the territorial waters of Bangladesh. And these would not have been possible had it not been the enhancement of the maritime capacity. And the government of Bangladesh has also taken recent steps for enhancing its capacity, surveillance capacity. We do have Bangladesh Coastal Guard, and also we have Bangladesh Navy, who is responsible for the security from security perspective. But the government has also taken the new initiative of forming, bringing in the police force for the enforcement of actually illegal activity or enforcement of law within the territorial waters of Bangladesh. And perhaps my understanding goes that actually while forming this police force for the territorial waters, the Thai experience played a very important role. And of late, what we are experiencing is the trafficking part. Although there has not been much incident of arms or the arms smuggling, we have got only one case where 10 truck loads of arms were actually caught in the Chittagong region, which were meant to be supplied to insurgents in the northern part of India. So since then, we have, as a country, have also expressed our commitment that not to allow our territorial waters for promoting insurgency within the region, and also committing ourselves that we would not allow our the land route to be an access point for the regional insurgency. And that we have actually now, biggest challenge that we are facing at the moment is that there are a number of incidents of trafficking, where there has been actually cases of using the maritime route as a means of trafficking for forced labor. And thanks goes to Thai government. They have also extended their help and nabbed those human traffickers. I'm talking about an incident that took place about a year or so back, where the hundreds of Bangladeshi migrant workers were actually taken to hostage in the remote region of Thai coastal area, which they were meant to be actually traveling to Malaysia. And with the cooperation of Thai government and with the cooperation of Bangladesh government, we were able to, people responsible for using their territory for this creating hostage scenario and also causing the forced labor situation. So BIMSTEC could be the actually catalyst organization, in my opinion, who could relate or extend this cooperation. And from the government level commitment, I think that would be the day when we can say that we are truly a nation of surrounding Bay of Bengal. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Very good presentation. May I now request Dr. Sakhuja, Vijay Sakhuja, to kindly give his presentation. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got a dilemma, a challenge. 80% of my presentation has already been taken away by the four panelists and the chair, of course. But what struck me was, this is a good story. That means there is a convergence. We're on the same frequency. The grid is common. MDA is a good story. So I think there's a lot of solace to be taken in that. So I'm just left with just 20%, and I'm going to look at all these 5 sheets of paper, double-spaced, what I can do differently. And what struck me was, my first reaction is that MDA is hardwired. It's the navies and the coast guards who talk about it. When you look at the navies, when you ask a naval officer, of course, these days, they spill into the other domains also. What's your concept of a MDA? He says, he looks at the enemy, the ship, the submarine, the aircraft. You look at a Coast Guard guy or the ship, he looks at where I'm going to get the pirates, although pirates have gone home. But he's looking for pirates, he's looking for drug smuggling, etc. But the good story is that they still share a common maritime domain awareness, which comes, of course, we've talked a lot about the Information Fusion Center, the IMAC, and the IFC and IOR. And I'll not talk about those are there. Given that we are talking purely from a hard security point of view, I would argue we need to change the entire nomenclature of maritime domain awareness to read as marine domain awareness. And why I have got several reasons for it. Why I suggest this is, we've got a good story, we're talking the same thing. I think when you have in the modern world, we are talking about artificial intelligence, the drones talking to each other, everybody's talking on the same grid, and I think that's something very credible amongst the security, law enforcement agencies and the Navy, they are on the same grid. But as far as information sharing about the oceanic domain or the maritime domain, I think they're very, very suspicious. Nobody's willing. One would assume that information sharing is a public good. Like we did search and rescue, we don't charge. Humanitarian assistance, disaster relief, we don't charge. We do counter-piracy operations, we take them, hotes, we manage generally, they are not good for us. So we go counter-piracy, we don't charge. But here I would assume even information sharing would be, we don't charge. But today information sharing is with a bit of a caveat. How often I'm going to share with my neighbor, with Thailand, with Bangladesh, anybody, what I'm going to put on my seabed sensor? What kind of information that I'll be gathering from all that oceanic domain? Blue economy is a very beautiful concept. But then we must also tamper that with sovereignty issues. Bangladesh, your entire Maritime Zones Act is there. We're going to have new definitions, new boundaries. How we're going to work on this? I think there's a need to start looking at it, the MDA, from a marine domain awareness point of view. And let me add another one. We are into almost literally climate change is really on us, and we have a very fantastic, in September, we came across this report, special report on the oceans and cryosphere in the changing climate. I think the next session will discuss this report. And that is where I think we have a problem at hand. There's issues of environment, ecology. In Bay of Bengal, we got oxygen declining zones. The entire ecosystem will be perishing. While we'll do a great job catching pirates, but we would have forgotten something fundamental. That is going to affect us, our livelihoods. After all, what is this maritime domain awareness? It is meant for a good sea order, commerce must go on, livelihoods must sustain, etc., etc. I think we need to change the narrative. It's not for the purpose, for academic purposes, but an operational, functional narrative of a different kind is needed. Do we need a MDA or a M and a small RDA, marine domain awareness? A week or 10 days from now, we'll be into COP, which has shifted from Chile. It has come to Spain, and they're calling it a blue COP. There is a relevance and reference being made about the oceans time and again for the last several years. There is a realization that maritime domain awareness is good, but at the same time, marine domain awareness is missing, and that's we are waiting for that report to come out and tell us what is going to be with us. In the morning, we were suggested that there's going to be an ad hoc working group on maritime security. I would rather venture to suggest let's have an ad hoc working group or a study per se in the BIMSTEC on marine ecology, marine environment, fisheries. We've got all these structures. We talk about IUU fishing, the concept notes talks about it. Most of us who are attending these conferences and speaking at these conferences talk about IUU fishing, but at no stage, at least in Asia, do we have a process when the ship is bringing back the catch? Do we ask him, where is the trail? Where do you pick it up? Was it IUU or not? There are issues of human rights of fishermen at sea. There are a host of other issues. Security is good, but certainly human rights, human safety are equally important. One of our panelists raised the issue about underwater infrastructure, pipelines. We are not talking about having our electricity, DC current move through cables underwater, fiber optics. These are the things which will be with us in the coming years. This is where we need to invest, and this will be a different domain, what we call an underwater domain, of which we still do not, we call it MDA if you look at it. MDA is purely surface and bit of air or bit of space because you bring in satellites for surveillance, etc., etc. What about underwater domain? That is absent in our discourse. In the morning, it was also suggested, can Bay of Bengal or BIMSTEC create that laboratory of new ideas. I think we have an opportunity at hand. Let's turn the entire MDA into a new way of looking at it. I'm not suggesting MDA is not important. As a matter of fact, MDA will be the foundation or the building block in which we have built up trust amongst ourselves and build on that these marine or softer issues which are in the context over here. Yes, certainly, we can't start off new organizations. MDA is discussed, debated, talked, practiced in the IORA. Is there a dialogue between IORA and BIMSTEC? Do we need to duplicate these things? These are the issues to be irons. I mean, do we need to create all this? Are these issues discussed in the Milan, which the Indian Navy has been hosting for several years? It is hard issues, security, counter-piracy, etc., etc. If one was to look at the kind of menu of each of the bilateral exercises, I think we are, sorry to say this, I'm a practitioner, former practitioner, we are into a cooperation trap. There is overload of cooperation, realistic issues. Leave aside the warfare, but realist issues are the oceans, what they're going to offer us. In those many terms, I think we need a new narrative altogether. Ladies and gentlemen, MDA, I think, will fall flat as we enter into a new domain called 4IR, Fourth Industrial Revolution technologies. We're going to have artificial intelligence, we're going to have robots, space, air, surface. They'll create a new paradigm altogether. Are the IFCs, etc., primed for that? Not yet, to my understanding. They're going to be just not few stakeholders, not the Navy, not the Coast Guard. We need to bring in Med Department. We want to bring ecology, marine sciences, in our context, Ministry of Earth Sciences, International Seabed Authority. I think, Captain, you shared with us those 4 logos. ILO, IMO. Interestingly, we must go back to the definition provided by the International Maritime Organization, which suggests a much wider. It says, all areas and things of, on, under, relating to, adjacent to, or bordering on a sea, ocean, or other navigable waterways, including all marine-related exercises, infrastructure, etc. It takes us into the heartland. We cannot say marine domain awareness is oceans or maritime domain awareness is oceans. I think there's rivers. At least 2 major container ports in Myanmar, all right? In our context, they go up the river, Irrawaddy, and in our case, the Hooghly. And they have a different peculiarities of kind of a domain awareness. So here we find that I think an IMO provided definition will be useful to build a marine domain awareness, and certainly I'm not suggesting once again that MDA is not important. MDA is critical because we have built certain amount of trust. That's why all the 4 panelists had said so much and I had nothing left. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Vijay Sakuja. You certainly raised some very important and new issues. I now turn to the speaker from Myanmar, Dr. Nyang Sui. Doctor.
Thank you, Admiral. Hello? Yeah, I would like to discuss about the Myanmar's perspective on the maritime domain awareness, especially as for the BIMSTEC region. So this is content. The changing of the maritime security scenario in the post-Cold War era is reflected in the transformation of the naval doctrines, strategies, and the force structures evidenced in the several Indian Ocean nations. There's an increasing focus on combating against the common non-traditional threat of the region through the naval cooperation. And the effect, as we understand that the maritime domain awareness is the effective understanding of anything associated with the maritime domain, and that could impact security, safety, economies, or environment. And the concept is the creation of the maintaining of security at the sea is essential to the mitigating threats short of war, including piracy, terrorism, weapon proliferations, drug trafficking, and other illicit activities. And countering these irregular and transnational threats protect our homelands, enhance global stability, and secure the freedom of navigation for the benefits of all the nation. And there are some alternative perspectives on maritime security we should consider, which are the security of the sea itself, ocean governance, maritime border protection, military activity at the sea, and the security regulation of the maritime transportation system. And we are now facing more on the non-traditional maritime security, such as the piracy and armed robbery against ships, maritime terrorism, trafficking on drugs, etc. And Indian Ocean has a significant strategic values, such as it is an important geopolitical hub connecting the trade route in the Africa, Asian Pacific region, Middle East, and Australia. And also it is home to some of the busiest fishing grounds and the shipping route in the world. And about the 50% of the oil and the 40% of the gas shipment navigate this area, etc. And this is according to the International Maritime Bureau Reporting Center for the first half of this year. There are some incidents relating to the piracy and robbery against ships, and there are some incidents in the BIMSTEC region. And for the Myanmar is one of the Bay of Bengal countries. It has a long coastline, about more than 2,000 kilometers, which in 2017, Myanmar-India signed 11 agreements in a range of various sectors, including one on the maritime security cooperation. It is an agreement for the sharing the white shipping information to improve data sharing on the non-classified merchant ship or the cargo ships. And also Myanmar is promising to become more active as regards bilateral and multilateral naval cooperation. For the same year, Myanmar participated in the biannual Milan exercise organized and hosted by the Indian Navy, and also cooperation with others navies such as Malaysia. And for the non-traditional maritime security issues, Myanmar is concerned about some non-traditional challenges in its maritime environment. Ones are related to apparent rapid depletion of the fish stock, which is linked to a combination of overfishing and illegal fishing. The incident of the piracy and armed robbery have at the time been a source of serious concern for the South Asian and South Asian governments. And as we don't have our Coast Guard, currently we are planning to establish the Coast Guard. So Myanmar Navy has responsibility for the traditional naval operation and also the maritime law enforcement responsibility. So Myanmar has a close contact with the regional country to protect the non-traditional threats such as piracy and robbery and drug trafficking, etc. Myanmar cooperate with the ASEAN country as well as the International Organization for the Maritime Security, and it has established a Maritime Rescue Coordination Center in at the ARE Regional Naval Command in Yangon. And Myanmar signed and ratified the regional cooperation agreement on combating piracy and armed robbery against ships in Asia, recap established in Singapore. And also a focal point was established at the Ministry of Home Affairs. And also an officer from the Myanmar Navy was attached to the Information Fusion Center in the Singapore as an international liaison officer and since 2014. As a part of the National Search and Rescue Committee of the Myanmar, the Navy participates as a Maritime Rescue Coordination Center, MRCC. This is the Information Fusion Center in the Singapore. India has also a similar center, as I well did. And after construction of the Sitri and Chowphu dispute in the Rakhine State, in the western part of the country, there will be the many shipping lines calling at these ports. Due to the significant increase of the maritime trades, challenges and threats to the maritime security will become more complex and increase. Myanmar Navy has the direct communication link and the hotline with the neighboring navies, like the Indian Navy for the maritime security cooperation. To conduct maritime security effectively and efficiently, the Myanmar Navy is enhancing cooperation, intelligence, and information sharing concerning with the maritime challenges and the threats, including search and rescue. To enhance the maritime security in the Bay of Bengal and the Adman Sea, Navy has conducted Navy-to-Navy. Navy started off with Bangladesh and the Indian Navy, and also with the Royal Thai Navy and the Malaysian Navy. So the regular talks between these neighboring country and the regional country could assist the enhancement of the maritime security. Myanmar has also participated in the Milan exercise since 2006, hosted by the Indian Navy at Adman and Nicobar Island. So also the naval vessels and the maritime patrol aircraft conducted the coordinated patrol with the Indian Navy vessel each year. So the human trafficking, sea robbery, and piracy are the most common threats for the regional maritime security. Maritime security is developing as the ASEAN and the regional country, and they are cooperating, and the ASEAN Navy are coordinating with the law enforcement agencies and the ASEAN Plus country to enhance the capacity building in implementing ASEAN political and security community of the ASEAN integration in 2015. And Myanmar water is adjacent to the Bay of Bengal and Adman Sea, so the illegal migrant and the human trafficking are the maritime security threats encountered in the geopolitically important Myanmar waters. The human trafficking affects every country of the world as the country of origin, transit, or the destination. Despite it is important to prevent human trafficking, it also need to provide humanitarian assistance at sea. Actually, Myanmar is not the origin of the boat people. It is just a transit country. However, the Navy is giving immediate assistance to the illegal migrants at sea. The Navy searched and rescued more than 1,000 victims of human trafficking from 2012 to 2015. The number rescue were increasing during past years. We must now providing the humanitarian assistance to the boat people and repatriating to the original country. And also, Navy is actively cooperating with the International Navy in providing humanitarian assistance and preventing illegal migration at sea. So my recommendation is that we should more expansion on the coordination between the regional navies and the maritime law enforcement agency, such as coordinated patrol corvettes, joint counter-terrorism exercises, and also joint counter-piracy exercises and the HADR exercises. And also we should more focusing on the intelligent information sharing, such as in the Information Fusion Center.
As a Lieutenant Commander in the NCC, and he is an ex-member of the Parliament of Nepal. Dr. Indrajit Rai, please.
Thank you, Admiral. Distinguished gathering and respected Director of this VIF and other ladies and gentlemen. I am going to talk on the maritime domain awareness since I belong to landlocked country. Being an ex-Lieutenant Commander of Navy, I dare to say a few words on this topic. Before I enter on my topic, I want to draw attention of all this gathering about the Nepal. First, this morning I've seen the book which is written by Mr. Vijay and Soman, and this is forwarded by our learned Dr. Gupta. The title is The Sea of Collective Destiny, Bay of Bengal. Means collective destiny means I think Nepal also is there. Here my question and my grievances is this: what is the role of Nepal and Bhutan in Bay of Bengal till now? Is there any space given by BIMSTEC to these two countries? Is there any boat, a single vessel is sailing in the Bay of Bengal? No. Gentlemen, answer is no. Here is my question. When BIMSTEC is there, when Nepal and Bhutan also one of the members of that BIMSTEC. Last time I was in the Bangladesh also in this think tank dialogue. This time also. That time also there was a topic on the coastal guards. This time also we are talking about the maritime domain. Then when other countries are talking about the domainness, here we are talking about our presence. Is there our presence is there? No. That is why my request is this humble gathering should think on this point, and it should be one of the agenda in coming think tank dialogues, how the BIMSTEC can give a spaces and access to Bay of Bengal and Indian Ocean. Now I enter in my real speech. Maritime domain awareness is very wide and encompassing subject. Therefore, merits and special mention while maritime security nation is taken into account. Maritime domain awareness is very, is repeating. Though Nepal is being a mountainous and landlocked country, it doesn't have direct access into the sea, but internationally it is accepted that every landlocked country should have access in the ocean through its neighboring countries. Indian government has established a National Maritime Authority for India to ensure cohesive policy making, effective coordination on the coastal security. Measures should have authority dealing with the maritime issues in the country. What is the voice of India? According to Indian Prime Minister, Mr. Modi, India's agreement in the Indo-Pacific region is to be based on the 5 S. That is Samman, respect, Samvad, dialogue, Sahyog, cooperation, Shanti, peace, and Samriddhi, prosperity. So, now what is the role of Sri Lanka in this Indian Ocean Bay of Bengal? According to Sri Lanka Navy Maritime Strategy 2025, Sri Lanka also has other pressing maritime concerns such as illegal and unregulated fishing and human and drug trafficking. It may be more vulnerable these to short to medium term than the effects of India-China maritime competition in the Indian Ocean. To properly tackle these maritime security threats, Sri Lanka needs to first take stock of its resources. For a country that struggles to pay external debt, reducing its fiscal deficit, and reducing while also maintaining a sizable armed forces, modernizing its serious. Now you see the rivalry in the Indian Ocean. We are all seeing it. The interest of China. China's economic and geostrategic presence in the Indian Ocean through the Belt and Road Initiative, its showdowns other countries in the South China Sea. Deep sea exploration, uncharted water, and the creation of artificial inlands to a more aggressive and trajectory in Chinese behavior. In response, India has been rapidly modernizing its navy, its efforts, and build both defensive and offensive capabilities to counter China while protecting its offshore interest. Now, counter by America in this field. China has already invested heavily port development in Sri Lanka. Its ports may be militarized by China in the future. The United Nations now seeks greater engagement in the Sri Lanka Navy to counterbalance the China's growing presence in the region. At last, today growing escapities and multilateralism, regionalism, anti-globalization, sentiments and nations' self-attitudes are hampering the security cooperation. Illegal, unreported and unregulated fishing, IUU, has been bone of the contention. between India and Sri Lanka. Soaring otherwise is cordial relation. The specific and the most important recommendation.
These slides which are being projected
Yeah.
on the screen, I think are a little different.
No, I'm not projecting there because my mind is diverting.
Okay.
I'm just being on the
So
speech only.
the audience may please ignore the slides which are being
please.
projected.
Sorry for that. The specific and the most important recommendation for BIMSTEC is to provide opportunities for Bhutan and Nepal, which are landlocked and raise their merchant fleets managed by their own citizens. You should give us a one corner of port where we can put our one ship, at least not for warship, at least that is for merchant ship, so that we can transport our materials. That is Chittagong, Bandargah, here Visakhapatnam, Bombay even. These are the ports where Nepal can use. India should take a lead to provide finance through a separate blue economy fund to facilitate this process of this transformation of landlocked countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Indrajit Rai. We have some time. Our session is till 3:30 and it's 3:10. I will very quickly in the next 2 minutes quickly round off the major points which the various speakers have made. I must say the presentations have really been outstanding. The first speaker spoke about the existing facilities. The existing facilities must be knitted together. Analysis is most important. We must have a MDA, BIMSTEC managed MDA organization, and international laws like and organizations must have a role to play. Sri Lanka the speaker from Sri Lanka, he brought about other issues that operationalization of MDA is a problem. It's going to be very slow. There are problems of trust. There's problem of technology. How to overcome this bias of secrecy. You don't want to share information. He says smaller countries are not keen to be seen to be taking sides. So any organization that you become a part of should not be, misinterpreted. And he said BIMSTEC must be complementary to other regional organizations like IORA, and highlighted the importance of the undersea cables. And the speaker from Bangladesh, spoke about that let's concentrate on the Bay of Bengal. I mean, that's the focus area. And spoke about the maritime disputes which have been resolved by Bangladesh with India and Myanmar. I'd just like to point out that there is a problem about the grey zones which we need to also solve, between the three countries. And he gave us a very good input that Bangladesh has, approved the draft MZI Act. I mean, this is something for India to follow up. And Bangladesh is also the pioneer in this region with regard to the approach to blue economy. I mean, for many years now, they've been really speaking about blue economy, and our speaker also has underscored that. And he brought out another important aspect that let us enhance the capacities of smaller nations and let us, all pull together. Not everyone is, as capable. And underscored the importance of intelligence and commitment to non-interference in other states, and gave an example that how Bangladesh has been helping India in this respect. And Dr. Vijay Sakhuja gave a new thought to say that why MDA should stand for marine domain awareness, because marine is a larger issue. I must say that earlier NATO used to say maritime domain awareness. They used to call this term maritime domain awareness. No longer. Now they refer to it as maritime situational domain awareness. So that not only do you know who's where, but how is the situation developing. And Dr. Sakhuja spoke about marine ecology, the importance of human rights, the safety of fishermen. And he said that let's concentrate not only on the surface and the air domain, what about the underwater domain? That is something which the speaker from Sri Lanka had also spoken about. And he spoke about overload on talking on cooperation. I mean, that's what I understood, I think, that there is an overload, we are talking too much, but there is, not as much action. And he said, he asked a question that are the IFCs priming up for the future needs like cyber, space, or are they going to be restricted to just domain awareness? And he gave a suggestion that let's include the rivers also. The speaker from Myanmar, he's given a point of view from the Myanmar's point of view and reminded us that Bay of Bengal is actually linked to the Indian Ocean region, which is very important, and it should be examined as a whole. And he highlighted very important issues that Myanmar has stepped out, concluded white shipping agreements with India, and is collaborating very effectively and actively with ASEAN, member of the Singapore IFC, and said that it is important to talk. They are now in all fora, and he says that if you have more exercises and more talks, more intelligence sharing, you will do better. And finally, Professor Inderjit Rai, as is very evident, he brought out wanted to drive home one issue, that landlocked countries also have a stake in the oceans. If I'm not wrong, I was in Vizag. I think there was an agreement between Nepal and the Indian government that the use of Vizag port for Nepal was kind of fixed. I am not too sure if we allocated berths, but Vizag port always had berths, so I remember that. And he also highlighted an important issue, and that is China's growing presence in the Indian Ocean region, and that how that can possibly affect security and the simmering competition between big powers. I'll now throw the house open for discussion. Highlighted these issues so they remain fresh in your mind while you come up with some suggestions. And I will once again read out as to what was the task given to us. What are the achievable and mutually acceptable facets of MDA which can be implemented in the given time frame? Any concrete recommendations would be welcome. Thank you. Yes, sir.
I think this wonderful presentations from experts. A lot of ideas have come up, and a wonderful summary as well. I'm sure our note takers are taking note of these and will include it in our outcome document. Now, one thing that struck me after listening to all of you is, and also from the Bangladesh speaker, can we think in terms of some kind of a maritime cooperation act which covers all the BIMSTEC countries? So that all these aspects that we have talked about are there, and all the countries, including the landlocked countries, are included, and whatever needs to be done, at least 5-6 major pillars of MDA, maybe some aspects of maritime also, can be brought together, and this then can be signed at the level of our leaders. Is that a workable idea, or is it something that is not workable? Thank you.
Perhaps I could add to your idea, and I was just looking at the draft act that has been approved by the cabinet, and there is a specific provision in the act of Bangladesh which actually committed Bangladesh that it will extend cooperation in the event of piracy, for example, and arms smuggling or trafficking. And it has actually identified these area of activities which were the international commitment is given, and also providing extra territorial support in catching the criminals who are actually fleeing from other regional jurisdictions. I think this could be one way that, I mean, it is not possible under the current dispensation of the international jurisprudence that one act actually affects all the country, because each nation is considered to be sovereign. But this could be one commitment that at each level can extend and agree that each of the country will pass their respective legislation where they will commit themselves to extend cooperation for the others. And that could perhaps be implemented what you have suggested. It is not impossible to achieve, but there is a way that we could actually achieve that.
Yeah. Yes, Dr. Skoja.
To add to what the director had said, you see, it's an area where there could be conventions, as we all spoke about. There is commonality of interests in everybody. And as was brought out by Mr. Alam, that the act has been passed by Bangladesh, which provides for this particular thing. But what the director had meant was that, you see, we are, in this discussion, we are 1.5 dialogue. So we are not a talking shop only. We are going to come out with some recommendations. So a sort of a convention which could be suggested, in which all these ideas which have come out could be incorporated, so that those could be ratified. Now, I'm not saying that there are not other areas, there is Iona and all that. But in this one, we are all intimately connected. The Bay of Bengal connects us intimately. And we all discuss the various ideas, and they're very, very fine ideas. So what the director was saying, that if supposing we have to make a mark, and we have to go back to our governments, a sort of a convention which should be sort of accepted by everybody. So there would be a certain amount of mandatory requirement of every country to come in, which as it is, they are coming out informally. So make it formal, but make it such that it doesn't appear to be arm twisting anybody. It is being accepted by everybody. That's what the point, I think, that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, this idea is very, very good, sir, but I think we already have a structure available and a thematic available to us. Probably we have straight-jacketed some of the thematics. Blue economy, just the oceans? No. Blue economy runs into the river. I will touch it as far as at the bottom of the glacier. That's where the rivers originate. And the context of Nepal, I think there is already, probably you'll need to go through the IWT, Indian IWT, IWAI website. You'll find there's an enormous amount of work which is being done. Port development is going on along the river. And your fear that, Nepal and Bhutan are being left out, I think in our book we do a fair amount of justice. I bring in the concept of landlocked developing countries by international convention. By international convention, you are entitled to access to ports, globalization. You can access Vizag, which is by...
I think, Vijay, let's keep the rivers away.
I'm not talking about the... Sir, if we were to understand blue economy from a wider perspective, every body of water is a generator of an economy, sir. Because we just look at, because it's called blue economy and the whole discourse has emerged from the ocean's point of view, I think that's where our narrow definitions are. Also, let me encourage you. We have a good example. Mongolia is a landlocked country, but it's a flag state. Would you not like to do it yourself? It's a revenue process. You can have a flag state. People can register under your flag. So you have to be creatively looking at it. What does the ocean offer you? You have to see how far you can get to the coast of various countries, your neighbors, to get into this whole globalized world, which is sea-based. So my suggestion is that your fears of rivers is really, you would have to really relook it, recoin it, build up your rivers, and try transportation. Today we have a good example from Varanasi all the way to Diamond Harbour. We are moving Maruti cars. And we're going to do that reverse. Hydrography is going to be dredging is going to be taking place to make them navigable. Already connections are on between India and Bangladesh. So there is a huge amount of economy. Blue economy is not oceans. Blue economy, to my mind, rivers and every possible body of water, small, big, lake, whatsoever.
River transport can certainly be blue.
Yes.
Yeah,
and
we are
it is
doing
part and parcel of that,
inside
so
the
when
river
we talk
transport,
about
we are
maritime-
starting in Nepal also.
So Maritime Cooperation Act,
Let it go all the way to Kolkata.
Yeah, we are using the Kosi Nadi and there are
There
two,
we are.
three rivers
They're already
where
doing it.
you are inland.
we are already
Water.
building up port infrastructure, what will be dredging arrangements, etc., etc. So there is already a thought which is on, and your suggestion about Maritime Cooperation Act makes a lot of sense. Convention, but let us build it around blue economy. And that is one thing in which we are all, today Bangladesh has taken the lead. I think they are the most proactive.
I would suggest this panel after this will come together and come out with a draft of a convention, which can be sort of discussed over the internet and so on. Just 4-5 pages.
Yeah.
This can be given to BIMSTEC and
I think that's a very good suggestion, and what Mr. Akuja is suggesting actually in the context of sharing the resources, Bangladesh and India have actually moved a long way, because we have signed agreement where the Indian, we have got the permission for the local vessels coastal to fly over the coastal area, and also to access as far as, in the middle of the country, middle of Bangladesh, where the Indian vessels can actually travel through the riverine channels in Bangladesh.
And Mr. Alam, as you said, that your country has made provision in an act which can, fit into the convention, so that it should induce the other countries also to have an act which should be able to have a scope.
Yeah, I think it has opened up an opportunity for the regional cooperation in the context of the maritime boundaries.
Yeah, okay.
Actually, my point is this: there should be a special agenda for landlocked countries. The BIMSTEC should put in the discussion. And as you, Dr. Sakuja, as you said, as you kept the title of your book, C, which is collective destiny, means in this destiny list, Nepal and Bhutan should be there. So there should be a special privilege.
That is what I'm suggesting.
Yeah,
There
yeah.
is a separate.
No, we assure you, you are there.
Thank
You are
you.
very much there.
Thank you very much.
So,
You advise also.
yeah. So, any other suggestion from the audience, especially the younger and the brighter guys? Yeah.
Yeah, I have a question. I would rather say a query. I'm from landlocked country. My name is Navin Darel. I'm a senior superintendent of Nepal Police. Some topics, some words is very interesting for us. There are many problems above the sea, on the surface of the sea. And below the sea, the word that I think Dr. Vijay has raised, domain under the sea, pipeline, fiber optics and all. What my suggestion or request, maybe recommendation is, these issues need to be addressed in the next BIMSTEC Think Tank Dialogues, and hope Nepal and Bhutan won't get skipped on that and included in that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, very important point you made. That means, if you have a broad thinking you are doing, but let's get into the nitty-gritty and identify specific areas, especially which, affect you landlocked countries. Yes, please.
Thank you, sir. I am Yusuf from Bangladesh. As Mr. Chair, as you have mentioned about in your introductory remarks some of the insecurities, and later came some opportunities also. At the end, the tussle among the big powers in the Bay of Bengal also mentioned. My question is, sir, from the context of India, when China as well as we are talking about USA, how India is responding to it, particularly to engage its neighbors as well as to respond to the big powers, China and the USA, when they are also expecting their role in this place. Would you kindly clarify in this point? Thank you, sir.
So this is a question now to the chair. It's
a
fine.
very clever one.
No, it's all right. You see, India and the Indian Navy has been doing a lot of work during the last, I would say, 10 years. And our aim is, what the Prime Minister says, neighborhood policy first, neighborhood first, and security and growth for all in the region. The Indian Navy is not a very powerful Navy. We are a poor country, like, this whole region, but yet we tighten our belts to help our neighbors. From 2006 onwards, I have myself been involved in this process because I was in the senior echelons of the Navy. And I can tell you that whether it is gifting of aircraft or gifting of ships or training over 800 to 1,000 people, foreign officers and sailors, giving ship patrol boats, building ships, refitting those ships. So we do everything that EEZ patrols, hydrographic surveys, etc. we've been doing. Now, that is a response, our response to the other extra-regional powers who are trying to exert or assert themselves in the Indian Ocean region. That we are there for the smaller countries. The smaller countries don't have to look anywhere. And in our case, we believe in an inclusive growth, and not as, the professor from Nepal highlighted, that, China has come in and they are helping smaller countries, but there is a quid pro quo, and these very ports could be used, for bases by their navy and spoil the security environment. Never ever will you find in these last 10 or 15 or 20 years that the Indian Navy has been providing what we call ourselves as a net provider of security to all the smaller countries. Never have we tried to assert ourselves or seek something quid pro quo, and we have attempted to carry the whole team and the region together, because we feel that there is no point in us becoming a strong maritime nation if our neighbors remain weak. So therefore we've tried to bring up everyone else. I think that's the answer that I would like to give to you. Of course, many things can be said, but I think I would like to say it like that. Yeah, anything? Yeah.
Good afternoon, sir. I'm Commander Vrat Baghel. And because I am the operations officer of IMAC and IFC IOR, I have a counter opinion to Dr. Vijay Sakhuja, sir, to which you may present your counter opinion. My counter opinion is, sir, that IFCs, information, and MDA, even if it is MRDA, as per your definition, sir, will always be hardwired to operations. You talked about us being hardwired and therefore kind of being tied to operations. I believe they will always be tied to operations because hardwired to operations, because operations would be the next logical step. So for instance, if we are an information fusion center, and why is that? Coming to the Thai delegation point, is actionable information. If for instance we are doing information, if there's information sharing between Thailand and India, and we give some information to Thailand, what then? The answer to what then will always be operations. So for instance, if Thailand informs us of, let's say, drug trafficking or irregular human migration in our waters, that information has been passed. But what comes after that? What comes after that is the operation. What have we done about that information? So therefore, I do believe that information sharing, IFCs and MDA as a concept will remain steeped in and hardwired into the concept of operations. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much for highlighting that very important aspect. Yeah, yeah.
So you alluded to Sagar, which is a tremendous initiative the government took, both Sagar and Sagarmala. And they were meant for, Commodore A.J. Singh, I'm from the Indian Maritime Foundation, a former naval officer. Last week we had a similar workshop on coastal security, a BIMSTEC workshop on coastal security. And one of the things that came out in that was, are we doing enough to adopt each other's best practices? For example, the Thai delegate at that conference, Captain Anuchit, gave us a very good presentation on what Thailand is doing as far as IUU goes. But that was just shared there. I don't think we've all sort of collected it and seen how can we adapt some of those measures, how can the other members of BIMSTEC adopt some of those measures towards a larger good of the Bay of Bengal. The Bay of Bengal is a fairly closed body of water. And therefore, if 7 countries decide, or 5 maritime countries and the 2 landlocked countries in their own way decide to do something together, they can have a pretty cohesive arrangement. That's one, sir. Sagar, I would like to just ask the panelists from the other countries. We are doing our bit in Sagar. We're setting up the coastal radar network. We're trying to build capacity in the region. But the whole aim of building capacity is to secure the entire region and preempt a developing threat. That's the whole aim of MDA, that you should be able to preempt a developing threat. So is there any sort of institutional mechanism amongst the 7 members to decide who should do what towards this collective security mechanism that has to come up? What kind of contribution does each member have to make so that the larger region is protected? Instead of sort of looking at just 2 or 3 people to do their bit and one person. I mean, what I mean to say is that a cohesive network. So has this been discussed? Are there any staff talks being held? Has there any naval dialogue been held? Like, is there anything like IONs being planned for the BIMSTEC region? Things like that. Institutional mechanisms to strengthen the BIMSTEC coastal security and MDA networks.
Okay, got it. Now I'll just throw the house open for a couple of more comments or questions, and then I'll request the panelists to address what Commodore AJ Singh has said and anything else. Is there anybody else who would like to say anything? We are approaching the end of the session. Okay, now I'll just go. Anything, including the question that has been posed. You'll have to make crisp comments because we're just now at the edge of time.
So far, we do not have, BIMSTEC member states do not have the mechanism, such mechanism. We need to set up, at least we start from the easiest, from the non-sensitive issue. And then if we are successful on that issue, we just expand to another issue. We call it a spillover effect. We cannot cooperate in terms of federalism. We cannot cover all. We do not need any treaty or act or Maritime Cooperation Act, but we need consensus. We are convenient on the slow pace, step by step, and when we reach consensus, we can get it on one issue and spill over to another issue and so on. This is what we call ASEAN way.
Thank you. Okay.
I think in the context of what you have suggested, just let me tell you the obvious information that Bangladesh share three-fourths of its, or even, I don't know, 4/5 of its boundary with India. So both India and Bangladesh has been actually cooperating in many ways, and the coastal surveillance agreement that has been signed very recently at the highest level is one such example where you can say that use of common resources, because of the constraint of both economic constraint and technological constraint. I think both Bangladesh and India have been wiser to understand that we need to use the limited resources that we have to the best of our abilities. Although there might be people might be making a lot of different remarks about how Bangladesh has actually, there has been a lot of controversy in Bangladesh, particularly how Bangladesh could agree on the coastal surveillance at the hands of the Indian government. But at the same time, it also felt that this is how one need to create the relationship of trust and cooperation. And I think this could be a lesson learned, although it is unfortunate for Bangladesh that although we share very small, tiny part of our at the coastal area with Myanmar, but because of the other reasons that we have not been able to actually come together and actually utilize or enhance our the resource utilization.
Thank you. Professor, anything?
Sir, I'll say only last word. As you Admiral, I quote the quotation of Admiral Retiman, "He who rules on the sea will shortly land also." Thank you very much.
Yeah. Any?
One thing I would like to suggest that we should establish the MDA study group and the BIMSTEC or something like that. So,
okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Dr. Skouja, anything?
Yeah, just a brief response. Commander, I think you didn't capture the last word. I said we cannot dispense with MDA. MDA will be the core because that has brought us together. That's built up trust. So we can build on the MDA to create a larger MRDA. That is at the core. You and I can now talk. We can talk about these nicer things later. Please remember, it's a human tendency, any thematic, as quickly as possible, humans will securitize it. We began with climate change. Less than 2 years, we will already securitize climate change. So it is, security will always be there. I think Captain from Thailand, I think you have, I'm just curious to know whether your Thaimex is now interacting with IFC. I mean, this is another opportunity. Commodore AJ Singh, very briefly, so I would just want to talk about it. Best practices is a very good idea. But please remember, if there were good practices and best practices assimilated by us, We'll not do coordinated patrols. We'll only do joint patrols because each one still has those boundaries and suspicions. We will still remain on either side of that so-called the easy boundary. So this is always be there with us, and we have to be guarding against that. Again, recalling cooperation overload may not be very good. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It remains for me to thank all the panelists for your excellent presentation. But to answer the specific question which was put to the panel, I think from all that has come about, I would say that the steps are talks and more talks, setting up of MDA study groups, developing a consensus as to how to approach the problem, and especially in things like common challenges like IUU, phishing. And if we were to collaborate on phishing and exchange data, we would all realize as to who's the person, which is that country which is exploiting our EZ and stealing our fish, and we'll automatically then try and form an opinion and act against it, and sharing best practices. And finally, I think the recommendation which is being made by the director is the ultimate aim that we must achieve, and that is of having a Maritime Cooperation Act and signing a convention by all these panelists, after a conference like this, on a 1.5 track dialogue, I think would go a long way in furthering that goal. So with that, I thank all the panelists once again, and more importantly, the young minds in the audience. Thank you very much.